What's going on, guys? It's Jimmy here. So, Kim Jong-un, North Korea's president, arrives in Russia. And they're there to make some trade, some military trade. Weapons for weapons, or money, or one thing's for sure, they're there to strengthen their military alignment. And is this the making of World War III? A lot of people are asking these questions. And we've seen this in World War II when we've seen the aligning of the Axis, when we've seen, I almost said Putin, but I meant to say Hitler aligning with who he was aligning with when he started to take over country after country after country. And we're now starting to see this with Putin aligning with who he's aligning with to strengthen his military alignments. Yeah. Take a look at this interview I just seen. I want to show it to you because it's very interesting about Putin's thoughts and his inner mind workings. Let me know your thoughts on this.
We are more than 550 days into Russia's war in Ukraine. The U.S. has spent more than $70 billion to support Ukraine. And as Americans grow fatigued with the headlines on the war, Vladimir Putin is plotting his next move and meeting with Kim Jong-un to discuss a possibility of getting even more weapons. I want to bring in an absolute expert on this subject, Dmitry Alperovitch. He is an expert in all things Russia and Ukraine. He was there over the summer. He'll be returning in just a few weeks. He's the founder of Silverado Policy Accelerator, a DC-based geopolitical think tank. Dmitry, you and I spent some time this summer, and you explained this war to me. We were on a hike, and I said, if we survive this hike, which we barely did, I wanted you to come on the show and explain it to our audience. So I want to start with, remind our audience, we're a year and a half in. Why did Vladimir Putin start this war? Why does he believe he deserves Ukraine?
Well, to understand that, Stephanie, you have to understand Vladimir Putin. And most people assume that he is, the first line of his biography is always he's a KGB agent. And of course he is that, but that was 30 plus years ago. What he is more is a gangster, because in the 1990s, he was deputy mayor of St. Petersburg. At the time, St. Petersburg, the second largest city in Russia, was ruled by organized crime. And what did deputy mayor Putin what was he in charge of? He was in charge of casino licenses. He was in charge of export licenses in the ports, business regulations, all the things that would bring him into close proximity with organized crime. And you can see that as he later became president. Sometimes he lets his inner gangster slip through. For example, when he invaded Chechnya in 1999, he said, we're going to kill them in the outhouse. That's not the talk of an intelligence officer, even a KGB officer. It's not the talk of a president. That's the talk of a gangster. Just most recently, right before the invasion of Ukraine, when he was meeting with Macron, he said that Ukraine, he was quoting a song that's basically a rape song, gangster rape song. He says Ukraine has to take it. It's her duty. So that is who he is. And when he looked at Ukraine, he essentially assumed that Ukraine is his. Ukraine has to belong to Russia in his mind. He doesn't accept that it's an independent country. What does a gangster do when he sees his girlfriend go out in the town and flirt with another, perhaps bigger person that you can't take on? You're going to take it out on the girl, right? And it's not about NATO expansion. It's not about Ukraine's ambitions to join the European Union. It's about all of that. It's about a much more elemental desire to control Ukraine because you believe it's yours in Vladimir Putin's mind. And now that he realizes he can't possibly have it, what is he going to do? He's going to destroy it so that if I can't have it, no one else can have it.
And what could Kim Jong-un do to help him? How concerned should we be?
Well, it's a big problem because the one constraint that Russia has, and frankly Ukraine as well, is ammunition, particularly artillery ammunition. The 152 millimeter ammunition, that Soviet-era ammunition that Russia is using, that Ukraine has used before they moved to Western weapons, they're expending huge amounts of it, tens of thousands of shells every single month. And they're running out. They're trying to ramp up production, but they can't keep up. We can't keep up with it either. So everyone's going around the world trying to procure ammunition. We went to South Korea and procured 1 million shells that are basically enabling this offensive for Ukraine. Vladimir Putin is trying to do the same thing, and he is trying to procure it from Kim Jong-un.
Some Americans here and some lawmakers are growing fatigued. They're saying that's a problem. He may be a gangster, but that's not our problem. Remind our audience, why the $70 billion and counting matters and why we need to continue the support?
I think most people at this point assume that the threat to Ukraine is over, that Vladimir Putin has grabbed what he could, and now it's a question of how much territory can Ukraine get.
People do think that, but what is it like there?
But actually, the reality is that Vladimir Putin has not abandoned his ambitions to still own Ukraine. I think he's very likely to try another offensive later this winter, maybe in the spring, and try to grab more territory, perhaps even go against Kiev. So the idea that this war is just about which village Ukraine can take back and how much territory they can restore back to their sovereignty is really a pipe dream, because Vladimir Putin wants to continue this war. He has not abandoned his ambitions to dominate Ukraine.
So you think things are worse than ever there, right? People think it was 2 years ago when you saw schools and churches bombed out. They somehow think, oh, people are kind of getting back to normal. That's not the case.
Absolutely not. Well, certainly it's been bad over the last 18 months, so I don't want to diminish that. But the reality is that you have an infrastructure, an electric grid that's hanging on by a thread. Last year,
heading into winter.
Last year, it almost fell apart under these massive strikes that the Russians have been launching against Ukraine, these missile strikes. And they can do this again this winter. And it's a real question of whether Ukrainian infrastructure can sustain another assault like this.
When do you think this war will end, and how do you think it will end?
Well, in one sense, this war has been going on since 2014, for 9 years. Most people forget about that these days, but it's not a war that just started in 2022. And unfortunately, I hate to say this, but it can go on for another 9 years. And the reality is that while Vladimir Putin is alive, it's likely to continue. It may even continue after he's dead, depending on who replaces him.
So you don't see an end in sight?
I don't think one is likely. And Vladimir Zelensky just said this weekend that he's now preparing his country for a long war.
Is there anything that could end it?
Well, Vladimir Putin could give up. He could die tomorrow and be replaced by, a Democrat, perhaps someone like Navalny that could take over and end the war.
But I think that's the likelihood that that will happen?
Almost zero. I mean, he could die eventually, but I'm not sure that he would be replaced by them.
So your prognosis, this thing could last 8, 9, 10 years, even after Vladimir Putin dies, and he is not losing strength, losing motivation whatsoever?
I think it's very likely to last years.
That's a tough outlook.
It's very tough for Ukraine.
Wow. You guys can let me know your thoughts on this. And then we also had, I've seen some recent thoughts here that if Russia were to, for some way, one reason or another, get, let's say Trump becomes president and really steps in there and says, we're gonna stop the funding to Ukraine. I won't sign. Remember, all the funding that goes to Ukraine has to be passed through Congress, first of all. Okay, Republicans and Democrats have to approve the funding to Congress. It's not just President Biden that sends out this money or anything like that. I get some people think that, but that's not the case. However, Trump could veto any funding that's sent by the Congress, or he could just, rally the Republicans to not pass anything, or he could just veto anything. So Trump's, let's say he does become president. In a recent poll here recently, it was almost 50-50 between Republicans and Democrats. Because remember, you got to go back with the core here. There's a lot of Republicans that think Biden could never become president. He's too old. And then you have Democrats that think, how could Trump become president with all this, these felonies that he's been indicted for? So you got to remember that at the core, Republicans voters will never vote for a Democrat. And at the core, Democratic voters will never vote for a Republican. So at the core voters, you still have those Republican and Democratic voters that are never going to vote for the other side. So it really comes down to the independent voters. And a lot of independent voters are, it's going to come down to, will they vote for Trump with maybe the legal issues? Will they vote for Biden with maybe the age issues and or economy issues? Or will there be somebody else that steps in with maybe potentially Biden stepping down, maybe, or with Trump having the legal issues, will there be something there as well? Let me know your thoughts on that because we are still over a year away from the election. So there is a very real possibility of anything there happening. Very, very possible here. So, yeah. But if Trump were to become president and he really said, I don't want to help Ukraine at all, I just want Vladimir Putin to take over a mass amount of Ukraine. I'm not going to help Ukraine at all anymore. And he has said, I would end the war on day one. And the only way I could see the war ending on day one is he says, remember that Russia's position is we're not leaving unless we get a large portion of Ukraine and take it over as us. So that's the only way it would happen. Okay. In my opinion, you can let me know your thoughts here on that. So, as a peace brokerage deal, Ukraine would have to be given up to Russia. The problem with this is, and I've seen this opinion here. And you guys can let me know your thoughts on this. That Vladimir Putin would not stop after this. He might temporarily stop for a year or so, let things calm down a little bit. But I think that as I kind of thought this through, his life's mission seems to be to put all of the large old USSR back together, which would mean taking over a lot more countries, all of Ukraine as well, which would mean millions more lives and taking over a lot more territory. Moldova, he's already let plans to take over Moldova, Belarus, he's already taken over Crimea, and to continue to take over territory and country after country after country after country, similar to what Hitler did. Hitler wanted to take over all of Europe, and he did. He took over country after country after country. And if you look back at the history of Hitler, and I covered this in a previous video, he made, peace agreements with countries where he would, oh yeah, peace agreement, you surrender and we'll make a peace agreement. And very shortly after, he just continued taking over the next country after the next country after the next country. So you guys can let me know your thoughts on that, but like, would taking over a small section, which really is not small, it'd be thousands of miles or acres of Ukraine, would that satisfy Putin's quest to take over all of the old USSR, which would be mass amount of land, or who knows what his actual ambition is? Remember that they have already leaked plans to take over Moldova and Belarus, and I'd have to go back and see all the things that they've leaked by accident. But it doesn't sound plausible that Putin would just stop at this. Remember, they already took over Crimea back in 2014 by force, and Crimea didn't put up a fight really because they couldn't. How's little old Crimea going to fight against Russia? Ukraine did because they had 40 million people, even though that's less than half the size of Russia. Look at how well they've done, at least in the sense that it's a year and a half in, and Russia hasn't taken them over. So let me know your thoughts here in the comments. I'll keep you up to date here, and we will see. This might be a long, long war, and Ukraine doesn't want to just give up their country. Yeah. So if you haven't yet, subscribe down below. Click the bell icon so you don't miss out on any new videos. Thanks for liking and sharing these videos so other people can see these points of view that they may not have thought about. Click here to see the warning the White House just sent out, or click here to see the new problem that Americans are panicking over. Click on one of those videos next. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.